everybody, and welcome back to another episode of World Cup Group Talk, where today we're going to be focused on Group B. As you may know by now, in this series, I will be joined by special guests to focus on one of the nations in the group, and today I'm joined by Shireen Ahmed to talk about all things Canada and the World Cup. Shireen Ahmed is a fantastic multi-platform sports journalist, writer, author, TEDx speaker, mentor, award-winning sports activist focusing on the intersectionality of racism and misogyny in the sport. A great deal of her work has focused on Muslim women in sports. She currently is a senior contributor at CBC Sports here in Canada, and she has covered the Canadian women's national team for probably as long as I could walk. Shireen has written about, interviewed, and covered a lot of the players that are going to the World Cup. She knows exactly what that team has been up to in the past few years, the trajectory on the international scene, and there's practically nobody else better to talk about Canada than Shireen. Given the current climate of the federation and the sport, specifically the teams in Group B, Canada, as you might be very well aware, are currently in a fight with their federation. Australia, it was not an easy fight to get an equal pay agreement that they currently have in place. For Republic of Ireland as well, their needs have not been easily met. It has been a fight with their federation as well. And with Nigeria, a lot of their needs are being rejected this World Cup. We're going to be talking all things Canada and the World Cup, but we're also going to be highlighting the current state of the sport and the federations, and the fight that a lot of these players are coming into is not an easy fight. However, I'm done chatting. Let's jump talking to Shireen because it's a very, very, very good talk. Today, I'm joined by none other than Shireen Ahmed to talk about the reigning Olympic champions Canada ahead of the World Cup. Shireen, I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
Always. This is a big conversation, a big talk around the big team here. But let's start with the squad. Bev Priestman already named her 25-player squad. She's due to decide the final 23rd on July 9th. We know that Evelyn Viens and Clarissa Larissé from Sweden won't join until the 10th, so actually after the cut is made. Knowing that in mind and just looking at the injuries and a lot of the players that are dropping back into the squad, who do you think would you say are the two players that will unfortunately have to get that unfortunate call?
I'm going to back out of this first question you're asking me because I'm like, this is an impossible. It's an impossible sort of answer to give, considering that the players that are coming up, like, for example, Mimi Aladu had been invited to camp before, but didn't make the final roster, but has had a very impressive season in Portugal, won the Portuguese Cup. So, but is not somebody that has started in a national program on a senior women's national team, particularly at a tournament like this. Is it somebody I might bid on? Is also a late bloomer. Right. So I don't know. But then with the injuries, like Desi Scott, do you know what I'm saying? Do we wager on Desi or do we go with fresh legs? Like, what's happening here? And I would think that people are still reeling from some absences of the roster. Like, I know that, Saint Georges wasn't on there. So people were like, whoa, what's happening? I know that amongst some of my friends that are soccer writers and experts in the women's game, because I just want to underline that being a soccer writer in the men's game doesn't give you the authority to comment on the women's. So people might not be aware of that. You are.
Yeah.
But my point is that there was some, excitement or, buzzing about when it came out. But I think that being a federation that's in a position, or a team rather, to have cuts like that is a good thing. That's actually where we want to be. We don't want to be struggling to make a 25-person camp. We want to be cutting people. We want fans to be reacting and asking questions and want to have that. That's where we actually want to be. So considering the state of Canada's soccer at the moment, like as of today, right now, I'm not going to complain. So I've totally avoided answering your question, which is to say, I don't know. I don't gamble. I have no idea. I don't place wagers. I have no idea. I do hope that whatever comes out, I've been doing some interviewing myself. I was on a Priestman call a couple of weeks ago. There's a level of, and it's not only about fresh legs and health, it's also mental performance. And we know that it's about expertise and game experience and tournament experience, which is incredibly valuable. These are high pressure situations. Not everybody is like Jesse Fleming, who's played since infancy with the senior team. So, there are some people who may be new. And so I like that. So I'm excited to see the roster. I'm excited to see Canada go. I will be there myself with CBC Sports. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, we certainly have depth. And I think to bring out players that most definitely will make the cut are the on form Jordan Huitema, Julia Grosso. I'll even throw in Evelyn Viennes on really, really good form. The role is going to be important, knowing that Canada has kind of struggled scoring from open play. How important is it going to be that they're able to continue that form, during the World Cup, and also make sure they're able to connect with that front three line that has maybe seen some concerns of disconnect as of lately?
Can I also add Lacasse into that category?
100%. Chloe Lacasse thrown in there for sure.
Who has also, but basically was also awarded MVP of her league. And, so I think that's really important to add. And I think of those three you mentioned, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of maturation in terms of growing into the game. We've definitely seen that from Huitema and from Grosso. I said recently, Grosso had a landmark performance in Tokyo, but also the opportunity, and was named, midfielder of the year for, the Italian feminine league rather. And that's really important here, because what we see is that them growing as players in their own right, in their own form. So we're seeing Jordan Huitema finish in the front in a way that's different than Adriana Leon, is different than other players, which is very necessary to be all the puzzles that make up the pieces, to make up this puzzle. And I think that the connecting to come up front, or to have that midfielder creating the plays in order to have and feed it through, or do the plays. And we know that Priestman does a lot of studying. We know that looks at tape of, opponents and looks at it. And they know also we've got Kadisha and Jesse who play alongside Sam Kerr and know exactly how she plays. So we'll be able to offer some insight. And I think that's really necessary. Like, there's a lot of pieces that everybody comes together. It's not just about match day, it's preparation for match day. It's not just about the technical finishing. Canada in particular, this will be very much a tournament about mental performance. They've had a hell of a year. She Believes Cup was a disaster of many kind because of the pressure they were under and what they're trying to do off the field. So, hopefully they'll have the opportunity to be focused 100% into what they're supposed to be doing. Like, they've just had to meet challenges that they shouldn't have had to, that no, player in the women's game should have to. So in terms of form, I'm happy to see, especially with injury, like Quinn's back in their form, is doing great, had their first goal. Like, we want to see that excitement, so Vanessa Gilles has had an incredible year, won, French league. So that's also a part of this, that when you have this tremendous amount of success, and it's something that I wanted to talk about in my own coverage, is that in addition to the struggles they've had with Canada, they've been tremendously successful. I mean, Sinky and Janine won last year, again, WSL. So, like, let's remember that they're also got connections to their club teams and are doing very well, and they bring that confidence and that back.
Yeah, I certainly love the idea that you bring up that even those that are not injured are actually thriving at their club level. Maybe Adriana Leon could be that one minor exception.
Or Zadorsky didn't have a great year. Or Deanna Rose, unfortunately.
The injuries have hit them down, but those who are healthy and on the pitch, and you mentioned Quinn back on form, like, everybody's looking really, really good. A challenge is going to be Group B, which I know you've mentioned. It's called the Group of Death, not just because Canada is playing against the teams that are in there, but it's also because Canada is in there. They are the reigning Olympic champions. Katie McCabe has come out earlier this week and mentioned that they are going to be the toughest team to break down. That's the team to beat, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that you pointed it out. I missed that interview with McCabe, but I'm really glad you flagged it for me, because I can go back and be like, okay, this is Kate McCabe, like, legendary player. Like, again, Arsenal, unfortunately, I'm a gooner and I'll admit that. faced tremendous amount of injuries this year, all ACL tears, something else you and I have both spoken of and covered. So the fact that she's out there saying no, and this is also Ireland's first birth at the women's tournament. So I think that's really important. And in Ireland in itself, like Kate McCabe is a legendary figure and it's something that's important. So if she's saying Canada's a group to beat, I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. I'll take it. And I think one of the things that I do really appreciate about Canada is there's this type of confidence, like very much how, like Jessie Fleming, I had a chance to interview her last week, has a very different vibe. Like then you've got the Grosso Heidema vibe, which is all like chaotic, like Taylor Swifty. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's wonderful. Throw in your Afro beats, and that's what the playlist is. And I actually asked Fleming, what are you listening to? And her response was, I like a quiet pregame.
On brand.
Totally on brand. Like I remember seeing a feature with her a couple of years ago where she agreed to do the interview, but on her nature walk in the forest. And so like that's very, very Vancouver, old forest, let's get nature, which is wonderful because they're very different characters. And that's something else that I think is a wonderful story about Team Canada is the different people that get together on this team and how they, come together. And that makes up the strength and the connectivity, which is, I think, probably their greatest piece of arsenal is how connected this team is. And despite the differences, you've got Alicia Chapman. So Chappie's been there and is a seasoned player but is still participating in the TikTok and IG reels with the younger players. Like you've got, and it's really interesting how they bridge those generational gaps. And when I spoke with Quinn, they were like, although I'm 27, I'm 60 when it comes to technology. Like I don't, I don't
jump into that
way. Yeah. So, but then also said that Julia will probably force me to do something TikTok-ish, which is fine. Also on brand. So I think that these are all key pieces to them being a main player and a stalwart in that group of death. And there's a point that, I was thinking about in something that my thoughts I'll give away. People keep talking about Canada's history in the World Cup and how they haven't finished, but neither has Australia. The last Women's World Cup, I actually pegged Australia to be really strong and they didn't come through that way. One of the reasons I also don't wager because my bets would be off. But also, most of them I don't gamble, but I can't do that anyway. But my point is, Australia is a very similar position. So it's almost like Australia, who boasts probably the most formidable player right now in the world, in my opinion, is Sam Kerr. They're almost a mirror of Canada in a different way because historically they have not performed well at the World Cup and now they're hosting. And will they take that pressure or will it, because I know media in Canada likes this narrative of, now the group of death. Yes, a group of death because we're actually in there. But also, I don't think our past performances have ever precluded Canada from going forward. Otherwise, there'd be no gold medal.
For sure. And not only are we gold medalists, but we faced Australia last year twice and beat them. Nigeria also, we had another brace against them, but we drew one and also beat them. So kind of like the stats actually rate us this time in this group. And like you mentioned, like we love a good challenge, usually known to be good underdogs. What would you hope this World Cup or competition, I would say, kind of not necessarily prove to the federation, but what effects do you want it to have to the federation and on the soccer fans that are hopefully getting a professional women's soccer league come 2025?
Well, I think it's important to know that I've had conversations with Jason DeVos, the Secretary General of the Federation. I think the understanding of the importance of this team is not lost on him. Previous president, absolutely. Nick Bontis, I don't even know if he could name the entire roster, to be really honest with you.
No.
And now just like typically white men and the space falls upwards and goes and works, for Montagliano. So, but I just sort of feel like there is an understanding. It's just a matter of how to fix it. And I don't believe that the team, and this is conjecture and I'm speaking for myself, is working to be able to convince the federation. I think they're past that. They have a gold medal. They don't need to convince anyone of anything. They're playing for Canada and they're playing for themselves, which is what should happen. They're playing to make Canada proud. And Sinky has had such a storied career with the Thorns, but she loves that Maple Leaf. She loves that kid. Nothing makes her prouder than to do that. Like I remember seeing them on the podium and I just cried my eyes out. And I'm like, let's decolonize. Like, Canada is like absolutely built on Indigenous genocide and Blacks and, forced labor. Like, absolutely. But do I cry on the podium? Yes.
100%.
Oh my gosh. Like, and I thank you to Julie Black for changing the anthem in the way that I've adopted. So, recognizing those things. But at the same time, my point is, am I emotional wreck? Yes. I think that this team has no easy task because they are reigning Olympic champs, but also really feel like they don't necessarily get the respect that they should. I mean, like you've got your Brazils, you've got, even the Lionesses who won the Euros, like they have a sense, but at the same time, the Lionesses didn't have an easy time convincing English society that they were fantastic either. And they're a fantastic team. There's no question. I mean, injuries aside, they really are excellent and they were given no attention. I was in France in 2019. I couldn't find a France jersey. I wanted a Louisa Nassib jersey, one of my favorite attacking midfielders of all time, because she literally reminds me of Zinedine Zidane. So, and not only that, just because her own style of play reminded me of that tenacity, also North African, Muslim roots. So something else I'm very interested in. And technically she was perfect in 2015. She had a perfect game against Germany, which should have been like the semi should have been the final. The quarter, sorry, it was a quarter final. It should have been the final. Devastating. Still will never recover from that.
No.
You were like a toddler when that happened.
That was like my first Women's World Cup, like fully aware of the brackets and like how everything is looking like.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm, and I love that exactly what I'm talking about. So I think at the same time, there's all these moving parts with it, but Canada they know what they're doing. And I like the fact that they're dictating why they're doing it. As last week, they said they wanted an interim agreement set into play before they leave, before they get on the plane. And I think that's really important because that's something that the men did before leaving for Qatar. Right. They wanted something else. Of course, with the conversation shifting and the reporting being done that they're, Jason DeVos used the B word, the bankruptcy word, which is terrible, which is a lesson in sport management. Like, don't make shady deals because it will absolutely affect everything. And, I'm thinking about people that have to crowdfund and teams like the Reggae Girls of Jamaica that have to crowdfund to get to the World Cup, which is something I'm writing on as well. And is devastating. And it shouldn't be the case. And then where all those vaultfuls of money that FIFA have, and the system is broken. And unfortunately, that is highlighted when the women's side has to play.
Yeah, that's a very unfortunate narrative, and it kind of feels like a lot of the excitement of the World Cup is been shut down a little bit, if not massively, with the GoFundMe that we're seeing and just the B words being thrown around 2 days before a team has to fly out to the World Cup. Certainly not. Yeah, this shouldn't be happening in a 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup at all. But speaking of that World Cup, you're going to be there, present in Australia. Where can people, what do we expect of your coverage? I know you're going to be there with CBC. What are we going to be seeing Shireen Ahmed talk about?
Oh, I'll be writing for sure. I'll probably be doing some hits for the network. I have some digital fun stuff up my sleeve. I'm literally working on my calendar right now. I have some stuff to do before I go. I have one particular digital piece I'm very excited about. I don't want to give it away. But I feel really supportive. I'm also really grateful that I'm going with some people. Like, I'm at CBC Sports, which is a different entity than the news network, but I am traveling with some women who are doing coverage for the network. So it's nice to be going with like a little pod.
Yeah.
Especially because it's so far and I would be on my own, which I'm fine with. I have enough friends. I also am doing some stuff on the ground. There's this place called the Wheeler Center in Melbourne where I'll be based. And they've invited me. They do a lot of anti-oppression work and they're focusing on World Cup. So I'll be doing some stuff there. I'm hoping to connect with the Muslim community who are very prominent in Aussie rules football. There's a very old Lebanese community there, and I have some really dear friends. Asma Halal is a really dear friend of mine and is based in Sydney and does a lot of work in anti-oppression and anti-racism work, and is like one of the people who was fundamental in literally changing the no hijab rule in FIFA. She was part of that story with Moya Dodd, who is also a dear friend and a former Matilda. So I get to meet these people that I talk to in weird time zone differences. I get to see them, and there'll be a lot of selfies, so I'm not going to apologize for that. But the women's soccer space is really interesting. I've been here a really long time, and to see, I'm really happy Australia's hosting, first of all, because they're ready.
Yeah.
They are ready, and they deserve this. Like the hub of women's sports, there were a couple years ago, there was like 50 to 60,000 people at a cricket final. The vibe is there. Like they're ready and they're excited. And I'm really excited because that part of the world does have a different football culture, and we need to go. It's this reel that came out on CBC Sports, which I really love, is about me and quokkas that I'm very interested in. I have no interest in kangaroo other than eating some kangaroo stew. Like I'm really not. I find them to be like, honestly, like the Australian cousin of Canadian geese. They're super aggressive and intimidating.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely, they're very aggressive. So I've heard, you're right. Just like the geese.
Yeah, I don't like Canadian geese. They're sky devils. I totally traumatized by an interaction I had with one. Like I'm just
staying away.
The cute little goslings. You're like, oh, that's cute. Don't go closer. Like they have a 12-foot wingspan. I'm not interested in that. No. Getting slapped up by Canadian, geese. No thanks. No. So and likewise, koalas I'm interested in. Red pandas I'm interested in, and quokka is 100% top of my list. 100%.
The holy trinity of animals right there.
But I'm excited, and God willing, it'll be good. I'm excited to cover the tournament. I'm also really grateful. And this is something that could be a different conversation for a different day. There's not a lot of Canadian media outlets that are actually sending people, unlike Qatar, when a lot of people went.
Yeah.
And that's something to note. I'm glad I'm with an organization that believes in that type of coverage. So I feel like there's an inherent responsibility I have, and Canadians should know. I mean, some people who would definitely be sent are not going. And I'm not trying to call people out, but I just work at a place that prioritizes that opportunity and
Agreed.
The need. This is a team that needs to be covered in this way. And I'm not going to say I'm not slightly annoyed.
No, absolutely.
More people going.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Shireen definitely brings up a great point with the fact that there's not a lot of Canadian media, which is why you definitely need to be following Shireen for all the coverage and plenty of diverse conversations, which is the beauty of hosting a World Cup and co-hosting actually in nations like Australia and New Zealand, who have very diverse cultures and kind of mirror a lot of Canadian history even. So Shireen Ahmed, I'll be leaving a lot of her links at where to find her on CBC Sports, her Twitter, everything will be handled below. Shireen, I really appreciate you joining me today and talking all things Olympic champions and the World Cup. And I hope you have a very, very long trip, because that means Canada can make it to the World Cup final. And yeah, a very, very fun coverage time there. Well, that was all things Canada and the Women's World Cup, as well as very important conversations that we certainly need to be talking about, because women's sports isn't just the 90 minutes we see on the field. There's a lot of very important dialogues we need to highlight off the field, and a lot of these dialogues are actually very important in explaining the current situation on the field. So intersectional conversations are very, very important, and this World Cup should be a World Cup that we highlight a lot of those conversations. Now, Group B, if you haven't already picked up on it, includes Canada, co-hosts Australia, Republic of Ireland, and Nigeria, and has, in other words, been called the Group of Death, as we highlighted. Starting off with co-hosts Australia, they're coming in guns blazing, and I think Australia has been on a very, very interesting story in the past decade. Australia, for me, is always in a conversation of reality versus expectations, because often the media's expectations, the fans' expectations, and pretty much everybody's expectations is a lot higher, it feels like, than the reality of what the team is actually able to execute for various elements and various reasons. Historically, and taking a closer look in the past 10 years of the Matildas' history, looking at friendlies, major competitions, they really do struggle against the top 10, whether that could be the top 10 back in 2011 or the top 10 last year. And in the Asian Cup, a competition that you probably think they absolutely dominate, they haven't won since 2010. That's 13 years ago. Specifically last year, they fell very, very short in the quarterfinals. This is the first time that they were knocked out in the quarterfinals, and arguably you could say that the Matildas currently have their best ever team. The second they got to the quarterfinal against a better ranked South Korea, they fell short, and it kind of has been the narrative. I mean, obviously the Olympics, they finished fourth, they knocked out Great Britain. The next few camps were followed with players either out with injury or players coming back from injury. Caitlin Ford was out for a few times, Alana Kennedy, Steph Catley even, but you also had the likes of Ellie Carpenter drop back into the squad, and it was kind of like they never actually got a full camp until they took on the Lionesses at Wembley in England, which we all know was a 2-0 victory for them. For the Matildas, it has been really fun to see how Gustafsson has worked for them, because the federation is a federation that actually asks for results really, really fast. And when you've got a manager coming in with his expertise and he's trying to work with this particular squad, you're not going to get instant results. And I think that was something that a lot of the fans kind of weren't too happy about. And though there is those results now, there's a lack of consistency. But again, looking at their rosters, it's always been you've got a few missing players. Going into the World Cup, they don't really have one big major player missing. You've obviously got Sam Kerr, which a lot of pundits and journalists and media have been saying she's going to be the most dangerous player to stop. And rightfully so, because Sam Kerr is on fire. Like, she is extremely dangerous. They faced Canada twice last year. Both of those were at home for them, and both of those they lost. Now, Canada was also in great form then. They had great defensive games. They had some new rookies coming in, also having really, really good games against the likes of Sam Kerr. And also you have the likes of Leon, who's scoring a brace, like Shireen previously touched on. Bev is a manager that loves, like absolutely adores, going through games and footage and video plays, and I think she will be taking a lot from those two wins. Canada will come in with a lot of confidence, knowing that they just had been the co-hosts not too long ago, twice back-to-back games. Can Australia beat Canada? Sure. I don't think that's a very out of the odds question, but do I think they will beat them? That would be more of an underdog win for me. Moving on to the Republic of Ireland, who are making their debut in the Women's World Cup, a nation that's certainly enjoying the expanded nature of this edition of the World Cup. Fortunately, we've already got a players squad, and it's really interesting because it's a shame that there's a lot of players that are not involved because of injury and because a few question marks that are still roaming around. Eva Mannion and Megan Campbell are going to be missed. Obviously, Eva Mannion just made the switch to playing for the Irish internationally, but when she was fit and good looking for them, when she played for United, when she was healthy, she's definitely a really good experienced leader you want to have. It's a shame that she's not going to go to the World Cup, just knowing the road to recovery she's had to go through. For Megan Campbell, you're certainly going to lose that long throw that Ireland was very threatening at, and in a World Cup, it's those moments that could be game-changing moments. Upsetting to see that Leanne Kiernan is not in. Obviously, there were still a few fitness questions looming, and it probably went down to that. However, I'm quite happy to see the likes of Sinead Farrelly coming in with the story that she's had. It's what a story, really. But again, there's still a few names that you wonder, how did they make it? How didn't they make it? Jamie Finn, for me, was important for Birmingham. She played pretty much every single game from what I can remember. Wasn't in. But then you had the likes of Rusha Littlejohn, which she's an experienced player. She is one of the veterans, but has shown to be injury prone this season, and she hasn't been able to get a run of minutes because of just minor injuries that keep coming back. So it's those players that you have to compare, Littlejohn making it in, but Finn not making it. How do you weigh that out, and what was kind of the decision behind it? It's hard to say. Their attackers list, if you take a look at it, there's only 4 names in there. However, most of the wider players or attacking midfielders are actually listed elsewhere. So the likes of like Heather Payne and Izzy Atkinson are listed in defense when they will most certainly be playing either on the wings or even up front. So interesting how they've named a lot of these players, but a squad that is not at full health. We have to put that out there. But Ireland are such a hard team to break down. Like, the passion that they play with, they leave every single bit of themselves on the field. They're so aggressive. They're always first to the ball, very tight in the back. And I think watching their game against Sweden in the qualifiers was very impressive because Sweden is an absolute barrage of attack and pressure, and for Ireland to have been able to withstand that for as long as they did was such an impressive showing. And up front, they're such a threat because they have got a variety of different players that they can go up there. Now, it's going to be a matter of depth of attackers, but the likes of Katie McCabe can really pretty much play anywhere on the field. Amber Bear, I'd even put her in the conversation. She has been so important to that attacking line. O'Sullivan, like in the middle, she's so good, and she's been so important for Ireland's run so far into the qualifications of the World Cup. So player-wise, they can put a very good starting 11. It's a matter of depth, and it's a matter of if you're 2-0 down in the 70th minute, can you get fresh legs that can be game-changing? That's the question, and I'm afraid the answer would be something along the lines of no, it will not be game-changing. Going into your first ever World Cup, you're going to be drawn into deep waters that maybe you haven't seen before, and it's very, very unfortunate that for the Irish, they ended up with the likes of Australia and Canada and Nigeria. Like, those are 3 teams that could easily make it through, and you're also having to make a statement for yourself. So for a team who are debuting, their first goal is going to be get a win. Will Ireland get a win? I wouldn't put that out the conversation. Certainly, I think they're a tough team to beat. Their showings, even I thought when they had the 2 games against the United States, they were good, and they still had a few missing players here and there. It's a shame they're not coming in with full health and a full squad, because otherwise I think you could then really put them in a runner-up conversation. But I think this time maybe it's a little bit just not enough, again, because they've got a really hard draw here. Moving on to the final nation in this group, and the nation that is home to the current probably best African player in the game, most influential player of the game, most definitely in the African world, Oshuala, Nigeria. Let's talk about him. This is Nigeria's 9th appearance in the World Cup, and that has been heavily influenced by the fact that they almost always dominate the African Cup, and they almost win it. Not this time, however, because they were knocked out by Morocco, who are debuting into the World Cup, which meant they had to finish 4th. It was quite a surprising result. They obviously lost that Morocco game to penalties, but it does show you the level of competition in Africa and what's surprising. But let's shift the conversation back to Nigeria. Certainly has not been the best run of games. They lost to Zambia in the African Cup, which meant they finished 4th. They then lost twice to the United States, to Japan, to Mexico, to Colombia. Teams that you would probably expect them to win, and teams they have been able to beat before, and they have been able to beat them in very recent years as well. They've lost some tenacity in the backline. They've become somewhat less stable defensively, making errors that usually they would make, losing some duels and physical battles in the midfield that often they wouldn't lose. So they have lost a little bit of discipline. They have lost a little bit of focus on areas that they usually master at, which is physicality, tenacity, and being aggressive first on the ball. The Super Falcons are going to their first ever World Cup under American head coach Randy Voldrum, who was appointed back in 2020. He's come in and he's liked to operate your classic 4-3-3 formation, not a formation that Nigeria has typically played out with, not a formation that I think they've excelled with, because you force a lot of play from the midfield out to the wings, when usually a lot of their good work actually comes from the midfield. You keep essentially, and that's how you produce a lot of the attacks, that's how you produce service. He's kind of come in and tried to change their style of play a little bit, which is not always a bad thing, but it has taken time to maybe kind of really for him visualize it properly on the field. And the players in the back aren't necessarily bad players. I mean, you've got Ashley Plumtree, who I think has been really bright for them. Their captain, Ebby, in the back. She's so experienced and she's so good and she knows exactly what to do in the back. Michelle Alozi from the NWSL, Emiran, another youngster coming up, also playing in France. So they've got quality in the back, but it's for some reason clearly not mixing well together as it has been from prior years. In the midfield too, plenty of quality. And what I love about this midline and kind of even forward line, I would say, for Nigeria is they're relatively young players in terms of most of them will probably have another World Cup in them. And I think this is what they need to kind of start hitting those peaks of, right, we're playing over together this World Cup. We probably got another World Cup with this exact group next time. So it's making sure you're able to work on those relationships. You're able to work on those chemistry links that have fallen behind for, again, a reason that I can't pinpoint too well. I'm excited to see Oshuala in the big stage again. That's no surprise. I'm excited to see her combine with the likes of Gift Monday. Great name, but she is also has been really good in Spain as well. So them working together would be really, really fun to see. With the recent call-ups, with the recent forms, and the unfortunate ongoings with the federation right now, I don't think they're going in with an optimal position. They're not in an optimal situation, and unfortunately you could 100% put your finger on the federation, because the federation has the job and the duty of setting up the players to success. They need to make sure they're putting the players, the staff, and everybody involved in a position where they can absolutely thrive. And what we have seen over and over again is that federations consistently fall back behind on this. Like Shireen mentioned, it's very sad that we see these flaws with the federation when the women's national team is playing. It's almost actually just not even heard of during this day and age that you see federations act like this when the men's are playing. It's the same federations that are managing the men's team, but all of a sudden they don't have a budget to work on. All of a sudden they don't have resources when the women's national team are playing. And with the fundings that are going into this from FIFA, with the players receiving the funds that they absolutely receive, it's such a shame to see federations, in other words, kind of screw up their players. They're absolutely being thrown under the bus going in unprepared because of the shortages and the lack of preparation, lack of planning that the federation has put in place. So it infuriates me that a team like Nigeria is going in hindered, and so are the many other nations. The likes of Canada in their group they've taken this to court. It's not optimal, and it's so frustrating to see this conversation happen still in 2023, weeks before the Women's World Cup has to kick off. It's absurd. But for Group B, it's going to be a very narrow one, likely going to go down to the last day. Could even be so narrow to go down to goal difference. Wouldn't be a surprise, because you've got teams that can score and you've got teams that are very, very defensively stable. And this is the beauty of it. It's gonna be a chess match, really. That is just how I see Group B going. It's gonna be a battle. I have Canada topping it. Could be my Canadian bias coming in. I'll be repping Canada, obviously. But I probably have the co-hosts Australia in the runner-ups. It's not an easy group that they have to go after, but actually really funny. Shall Australia be the runner-ups, and shall England top their group? The two will meet, and we do know who gave the Lionesses their last loss. So what I'm trying to say is you basically need to tune in, and you basically need to watch every single game that this World Cup has to offer. But I want to hear your opinions, your chats, your discussions. This group is a big group and has a lot of big names and big nations, so there's definitely a lot of thoughts around it. I want to hear them. I want to hear your opinions on how you've been enjoying the series so far. It's episode 6, and it's episode 6 because this is Christine Sinclair's 6th World Cup, and we're talking about Canada, so it only felt right to do that. Now, if you picked up on that, then kudos to you. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. There's 2 more episodes of the series before the World Cup kicks off, and there's going to be plenty of World Cup coverage during the World Cup, so you definitely don't want to miss out on it. And I will see you later.